Hello colleagues, and welcome to Week 1, Unit 2 of SAP Cloud Platform Version Control with Git. In this unit, we will discuss the various places you could keep your Git repositories, describe cloning, and give a demo of the most basic strategy for Cloud Platform Repository Management, which is keeping your repository in the Cloud Platform Git service. You will recall from the previous lecture that since Git is a distributed version control system, there are multiple repositories, multiple version databases for a given software development project. This means the first question you need to ask yourself when starting cloud platform development is, where should I keep my Git repositories? First, keep in mind that when you develop using Web IDE, if you use Git functionality, your personal copy of the repository is actually going to be stored within the Web IDE itself. So, in a sense, the question is already answered for you. You will keep a repository within Web IDE. But if you're working on a team, you're going to want to have a central repository that the entire team has access to. Where should you keep this? Since you're doing SAP Cloud Platform development, the most natural place to keep your central repository is going to be the Cloud Platform Git service. Since your organization is already paying for a Cloud Platform subscription, you might as well use the free Git service to support your repository. So, when you're starting out with Cloud Platform development for the first time, and you're not sure where to store your central repository, the place to start is to keep it in the Cloud Platform Git service. If your needs change, you can always move the central repository at a later point in the future. You could also store the central repository on GitHub, Bitbucket, or really any other place that supports hosting a Git repository. SAP customers store their repositories in a variety of locations, but three of the most common are GitHub, Bitbucket, and the Cloud Platform Git service. Now, let's talk a bit about cloning. What is it? Cloning is usually the very first thing when you start developing with Git, which is why we're starting with the course with it. The cloning operation has no equivalent in a centralized version control system. Cloning is what happens when you take an entire source code repository and you copy it to a new repository. You create an exact copy of your repository to start working on it somewhere else. Well, it's almost an exact copy. The branches are named a little differently. You can see that here in the slide. It's a bit of an advanced topic, but you should know that when you clone using Web IDE, every branch in the original repository that you clone has its name changed. We're going to find out why later when we cover remote branches. And one additional branch named master is created on the copy. So if you have 3 branches on a repository and you clone it using Web IDE, you're going to have 4 in the new one. If you have X branches on the starting repository and you clone it, you're going to have X plus 1 branches in the new one. Keep that in mind because there's definitely a test question on it. Let me actually draw it out so you see what I mean, because there isn't quite enough room to depict this on the slide. So, first, when I'm drawing, I'm going to either use a convention that time goes either from bottom up or from left to right, depending on how much room I need. Those are the 2 most common conventions on the internet. So here is a repository. Here are some commits. We're going to talk about commits more in a little bit, and say this is your starting repository, and you have 2 branches. So here is your feature branch, and here is your master branch. And that is a common name, that's a common convention, master, for sort of the main branch on a repository. So then let's say you take this repository and you clone it. Clone. Now, let's see. The cloned repository is essentially going to be a copy. It's going to be an exact copy with branch names changed slightly. So this, instead of feature, this branch is going to be called origin/feature. And this branch is going to be called origin/master. And you're going to have an additional branch that I mentioned, pointing to the same place as origin/master, called master. So that illustrates what I'm talking about. Okay. All the versions and everything else are the exact same. In every other way, the repository is an exact copy, other than the branch names, and there's one extra branch. Now, there's a certain aspect of cloning that's important for you to think about. If you clone a repository, how are the two repositories aware of each other? Is the parent repository aware of its cloned child? Is the child repository that was cloned aware of the parent from which it was cloned? Now, the answer to that question is going to be very important. For now, you should know that when a repository is cloned, the parent repository here is not aware of the child repository. But the child repository is aware of the parent. This is going to become very important later on in the course and as you're working with Git. So this means that the parent repository being cloned, called the origin, it's not affected in any way when you clone it. It's not, the state of the repository doesn't change in the slightest. Now, we already said that the most natural place for your central repository to live would be the Git service. Keeping that in mind, it would make sense that if you have a team doing cloud platform development using Web IDE, when a new developer joins, they would open Web IDE and clone from the cloud platform Git service. So this slide depicts the basic strategy of keeping your central repository in the Git service and cloning it to Web IDE. Now I will demo creating an empty repository in the cloud platform Git service. You can follow along with me using your own free cloud platform account that we created earlier. So first, let's go to http://cloudplatform.sap.com. Now, right now, what we're doing is we're going to the cloud platform Git service. I'm going to navigate there, but if you created a bookmark to the Git service, you can just open that bookmark. But in case you didn't, I'll go there manually. So I will log in. You may have to type in your login information. Once again, let's go to Neo Trial. Select Services on the left. Git service, go to service. Now let's go ahead and click New Repository. Type in a name with only lowercase letters and an optional description. So let's call this CP Repo for Cloud Platform Repository. Central repository on cloud platform. Okay. Now let's click on the name of a repository, CP Repo, and see where it says repository URL here. Go ahead and copy that. Select and copy it. And then let's go straight to the Web IDE. If you bookmark it, you should have bookmarked the full stack Web IDE on Cloud Platform. And we will wait for it to load. Here you go. Now, we're going to go to the workspace level, select this here in the code area, right-click, Git, clone repository. You put the repository URL on your clipboard, so paste it in there. Do not click Add Configuration for Garrett. We're never going to click that until the bonus lectures in week 4. And let's hit clone. And make sure to put in not your GitHub password, but your username and password for SAP Cloud Platform. Here you see CP repo here. That's our new repository. All right, now there's nothing in there, but we've successfully cloned it. So now we have, if you remember, I said the child repository that was cloned is aware of the parent, but the parent is not aware of the child. Let me show you one thing just to prove that to you and make that sort of a tactile idea instead of a theoretical one. If you click on this and hit Project Settings like I just did, you have all these wonderful project settings for this project in Web IDE, and then click here, which is Git repository configuration. Now look, you have this setting here called remote.origin.url. And this is the URL you use to clone. So you see that this child repository that was cloned is retaining some awareness of its parent, or in Git lingo, its origin. That's why it says remote origin URL. Okay, so now you know how to create a repository in Cloud Platform Git and to clone it into Web IDE. Join me in Unit 3 now, where we will demo cloning from GitHub. That demo is going to be the foundation for most of the demos throughout the course, so that's one you're definitely going to want to follow along with.